As you probably know, Cherry makes a silent switch stem. They use it in their Cherry Silent Black and Silent Red switches. Gateron also manufactures silent stems that have cushioning in them, and these are used in both the Zeal Silent switches as well as the Alias switches sold by KBD fans. Now, if you've used these both, you may have noticed that the ones made by Gateron, such as the Alias and the Zeal Silents, aren't as quiet as the ones made by Cherry. For example, here is a switch that has a Cherry Silent stem in it. And if you'll notice, I'll move the microphone closer so you can hear. As I cycle this stem, regardless of what angle I use to cycle the stem, regardless of whether I apply off-axis force to the stem while I'm actuating the switch is pretty silent in all conditions, as you'll hear. Now, for comparison, here's an Alias switch. If I do the same test, you'll notice that at certain angles the switch is silent, and at other angles you'll hear some additional noise. The noise is worse in this position. So the noise is worst when the stem is bent towards the legs of the stem. So I noticed this and I wanted to get to the bottom of why. So, to explain the reason for this noise, I have a cutaway switch here. Now, this is actually an Alias housing. For the purposes of this demonstration, there aren't any differences between the Alias housing and the Zeal housing that would affect this noise. So, the same problem that you have with the Alias housing is also there with the Zeal housing. So if you notice, looking at the cutaway with the stem, this is a Zeal Silent stem. When the switch bottoms out, let's get it lined up here. At some angles, the first thing to bottom out is actually the leg. You can probably see right there the leg. The leg of the switch can touch the stem. Now, of course, the leg is not dampened. It's just plastic, so when that leg touches the housing, it's going to make a noise. It's going to make that tapping noise that you sometimes hear with these type of switches. Now, it doesn't do it at all angles. If the switch is pressed perfectly on center, what you get is actually not the cushioning pad at the bottom here, but the cushioning pad that's up underneath will contact. So up where the spring goes. So if you have a perfectly on center press, then the cushioning behind the stem where the spring seats will hit first. So that's the best case scenario, and that's why sometimes it sounds quiet. But unfortunately, In the worst case, that leg hits instead. So, for example, if your switches are in the south-facing LED cutout position and you hit the top edge of your switch, you might hear this tapping noise as the leg hits the bottom housing. So that's unfortunate. So you can see there. And actually, the funny thing about these switches made by Gateron is that the cushion on the bottom does nothing. You can see under no condition does it ever actually hit the housing. At least not in this housing, unless your housing is somehow different than mine. In my case, it's always either the leg that it touches or it's the cushioning up underneath where the spring seat is. This cushion here is useless. It's too small. It doesn't reach down far enough. Now, Cherry Silents don't have that problem because the cushions are different. The leg sticks out just as far, I believe, but the cushion sticks out farther. So if you look for comparison, here's a Cherry Silent stem. And you see how the cushion actually sticks out farther than the leg, which is how it should be. But that does make it so the piece of rubber that sticks out is longer, so that does make the bottom out a little bit squishier than the Zeal Silents. But on the other hand, it's kind of worth it if it makes the switch actually silent compared to a switch that's not actually silent. See, even if the stem is pressed at an angle, before the leg has a chance to bottom out, the cushion does. You see the cushion compressing before the leg can touch. So you're going to get a pretty good silencing effect in that case. Now you may have noticed, if you really mash your Zeal Silents, your MX silent switches, or MX Silents for that matter, if you mash them hard enough, you can still get that leg to bottom out and make a noise. But it's a lot harder because of that additional cushioning. Whereas it's pretty easy to produce that sound with the Gateron made stems. So just to confirm that this was really happening and that it wasn't some artifact of some unusual condition caused by cutting the switch apart, or just to eliminate any doubt, I did a little experiment where I took one of these switches. In this case it was an Alias, and I colored the legs with some Sharpie, and then you can see the Sharpie that I put on the legs, and then I cycled the switch at different angles and checked the housing to see if any of the Sharpie rubbed off. And here's the housing. So do you see that black mark? That's where the Sharpie rubbed off. Right. In case you can't tell where I'm talking about, it's right there. Right there. So you can see where the Sharpie rubbed off on the housing because that leg was hitting the housing. So in my mind, this is kind of like a design flaw with these switches, and it really limits how silent they can be compared to the Cherry Silent switches. If Zeal decides to do another revision of these to try to fix that issue, maybe you could think of a way to solve that. maybe, for example, this place where the cushion is at the bottom, if they don't want to make the cushion bigger because they don't want it to be squishy, then maybe they could actually make the plastic extend farther down so that the cushion still protrudes the same amount from the plastic, but then the plastic body of the stem itself extends farther down towards the bottom of the housing. That's one idea. But hopefully that'll clear up in case you're wondering why these switches are not as silent as you might have expected them to be.